The letter sat on Mercy Canton's kitchen table 3 straight days. The red wax was broken. The words kept burning just the same. Her father's debts. The ranch. $600 due by week's end. Or the land gone. She pressed her palms to the rough pine and looked through the window at the empty meadow. Her father's horses had once grazed there, tails flicking in the sun. One by one they'd been sold, traded for medicines and cornmeal to the long sickness. Consumption took him slow. It took near everything else with him. The house held the quiet of a church after the service, the smell of ashes and old books. Hoofbeats pulled her back. A single rider, straight in the saddle, coming up the lane on a fine bay gelding worth more than most men saw in a year. Black coat in September heat, hat set just so. Even at a distance, she could read quality in the silver trim, the polished boots, the ease of his seat. He had the careful carriage of a man who'd never known want. Mercy smoothed her worn calico, stepped out to the porch, and folded her shaking hands. This had to be him. Thomas Garrett. The name on the letter that wouldn't quit echoing. He swung down with a grace that said he'd learned horses young, removed his hat, and turned toward her. Younger than she'd pictured. Maybe 30, clean-shaven. Kind eyes that didn't match the steel she'd braced herself to meet. Miss Canton? The voice carried schoolhouse polish with a warmer core beneath. I'm Thomas Garrett. Mercy nodded. Her voice had gone off somewhere and forgotten the way home. Up close she saw fine cloth, a gold watch chain, hands without calluses. Everything about him said he came from a world that sent men to dinner in linen, not to bed with dust in their teeth. I receive your father's letter, he said. And there was in his tone no triumph, no tallying. Something near regret. I'm sorry for your loss. Samuel was a good man. Kindness struck her harder than any demand would have. She prepared herself for business, for papers and signatures and strangers picking through her life. She hadn't prepared for gentleness. Thank you, she managed. Would you like coffee? He studied her face as if it held more than she knew. I'd be grateful. Inside, the cabin felt smaller with a minute. His presence filled corners that had grown too quiet since her father's passing. Mercy busied herself at the stove, glad for the rattle of cups and the small comfort of a task. He took in the stone fireplace Samuel had laid himself, the shelves of thumbed books, the quilt her mother stitched before the fever took her when Mercy was 12. Your father wrote about you. Thomas said, quiet as a prayer. In his letters, he was proud of how you kept things together. Mercy's hand paused over the pot. He wrote to you? For months. He set his hat on the table beside the broken seal letter, each movement careful. We started with business, ended up elsewhere. He spoke of your garden, of your nursing, said you had your mother's heart and your own grit. She turned toward him, coffee forgotten. You knew my father? Not well, but I knew his character. Thomas accepted the cup she offered. Their fingers brushed. His hand was warm and steady. The debt wasn't drink or cards, Miss Canton. It was doctors and feed in a drought. It was doing what he had to. Relief and grief tangled tight. She'd wondered, in the nights when his coughing shook the walls, if shame was hiding in their ledger. She'd feared what the truth might do to the memory she needed to keep clean. He sold everything he could bear, she whispered. I know. He set the cup down, eyes steady on hers. That's part why I'm here. To collect, she said, because the table between them held more than coffee. Silence took a breath. He studied the black surface of his drink as if it could show him a way forward. When he looked up, duty sat beside something softer in his expression. Miss Canton, I own 3 ranches across 2 states. Interests in Denver and Colorado Springs. $600. He let the number hang and then set it aside. It isn't the money that brought me. Her heart knocked once, hard. Then what did? Your father asked me to look after you. He said it plain, in his last letter. He said you could stand on your own feet, but the world's not always kind to women alone. He asked me to see you weren't left with nothing. The goodness of it hit her, like a warm wind after snow. She pressed a hand to her mouth, steadied her breath, and found her voice. I won't take charity. I'm not offering charity. He leaned in, earnest. I'm offering something else. Mercy searched his face for the catch. Men like Thomas Garrett didn't ride into the mountains out of kindness alone. There was always a price. What kind of something? He stood and went to the window, hands clasped behind his back as he looked out over the land her father loved. Cottonwoods along the creek, the long sweep of meadow, the barn in need of mending. A proposition, he said at last, one that solves both our problems. Our problems. He turned. Vulnerability flickered across his face, honest and brave. You need a way to keep this place and build a life that honors him. And he gathered himself. I need a wife. The words settled between them like something fragile. Mercy's breath caught, not from shock, but from the quiet way he said it. Not a bargain. Not a trap. A fact. You don't know me, she said. I know enough. He returned to his chair and leaned forward. You nursed Samuel 2 years without complaint. You've kept this place running alone with little money. You read and write. Your letters to the Denver doctor were clear and plain. You're brave because you're here at this table instead of hiding from it. And you have a good heart because your father had one and those things tend to pass down. It isn't the same as knowing a person, she said, but the protest had little fight. No, he agreed, but it's more than many marriages begin with. She thought of couples she watched across the years, love that soured, arrangements that steadied. Her parents had found both love and partnership. She'd always known that was rare. Why me? She met his eyes. You could have your choice among society ladies. A shadow crossed his face. I tried that once. His voice went low. She wanted the circles and the city, hated the ranches, and anything that didn't turn on her. Marriage lasted 2 years. She left for a banker and a ballroom. He didn't look away from Mercy. I want a partner. A woman who knows land and work. Someone whose worth isn't measured by invitations. Hurt lived under his even tone. Mercy felt a stir of understanding. I can't marry a stranger, she said softly. I'm not asking you to. Not today. He drew a thick envelope from his coat and set it on the table. This will clear what's owed and keep you going 6 months besides. No strings. Take time. Decide what you want. She stared at the envelope as if it might bite. And if I say no, then you still keep it. I'll find another path. He tried to make his voice matter of fact. Loneliness edged it anyhow. I gave Samuel my word I'd see you right. Her hands trembled as she took the envelope. It was heavier than she expected. Security has a weight to it. There's something else, he said. I won't press for an answer, and I won't court you from a distance. If you'll allow it, I'd like to spend time here. Help with the work. Let us learn each other in daylight. The thought of a man's footsteps in the house again startled her and soothed her at once. Where will you stay? Boarding house in town. Or I'll camp by the creek. Keep things proper. A small smile tugged at his mouth. I'm not in the habit of compromising women, Miss Canton. A laugh rose in her chest and surprised her by escaping. I don't know what to think of you, Mr. Garrett. That's the trouble. Then give yourself time to figure it. He rose, took up his hat. I'll come tomorrow if you'll have me. We'll start with a barn roof. Your fence by the creek's leaning, too. You don't have to. I know. His gaze met hers, steady and kind. I want to. When he left, Mercy sat with the envelope unopened before her and listened to hoofbeats fading down the lane. The silence that followed didn't feel empty anymore. It felt like the breath between lightning and thunder. The air waited. She thought of his hands, clean but capable, The way he spoke of her father with respect. The loneliness under his careful control. He could have demanded payment and taken the land. Instead, he'd set choice on her table like bread. It felt like trust's first small stone laid into place. Maybe goodness didn't always come with a bill of sale. Maybe some men with power use it to ask instead of take. Maybe trust began tomorrow, with shingles and posts and the truth of character tested by work. He arrived at dawn with a wagon of supplies, and his sleeves rolled. Mercy finished her coffee and stepped into the yard to find him already on the barn roof. The fine coat was gone, replaced by a work shirt faded honest. Sun had just cleared the ridge. The air held that early edge that promises heat. "You don't waste time," she called. "Daylight's precious," he answered, pressing a rotted board with his palm. "Another hard rain, and you'd have lost half your hay." She watched the way he moved. His hands lacked callus, but not sense. Tools fit them. He worked with the patience of a man who'd learned that hurrying was dear. "Hand me that hammer?" She climbed the ladder, surprised by how natural it felt to share a ridgepole with him. They fell into rhythm. He pried, she passed. He measured, she steadied. The morning warmed into cicadas and the click of nails seating. "Your father built well," Thomas said at a rest, forearm across his brow. "Foundations rock. Just wants tending." He always said a thing worth doing was worth doing right. Mercy sat on the edge, legs swinging as she looked over the spread. House, corral, the run of creek through cottonwoods. Took him 3 summers to get this barn true. Sound like him. Thomas's voice held a smile. In his letters, he never did speak of halfway. They worked on. Mercy found herself stealing small glances. How he weighed a decision before taking it. How he didn't curse when a board bucked his plan but tried again. The quiet satisfaction when the line set straight. At noon, she brought biscuits and ham to the shade of the oak her father planted the year she was born. Buttermilk, beaded cool in tin cups. For the first time in months, silence felt companionable, not lonesome. "Tell me about your ranches," she said. He leaned against the trunk, thinking. "Biggest is in Wyoming. Cattle mostly. A few horses. Jake Sullivan's foreman. Been with me 8 years. Knows cattle like a preacher knows scripture. You trust him to run it?" "Have to. A place that size needs a man born to it." Respect warmed his words. "I'm still learning some of what Jake knows by feel." "And the others?" "One in Colorado. Good horse country. Another in Kansas. Wheat and a little stock." He turned a blade of grass in his fingers. "My father started the Wyoming place. Built it from scratch with work and stubbornness. He taught you. He died when I was 16. The words came level, but the pain was old and sharp. Threw from a horse in a storm, bringing in strays. I learned by nearly losing the ranch 3 times. Mercy knew that kind of ache. Grief carves a place in the chest that never quite fills. "I'm sorry. It was long ago." He looked at her directly. "I learned something from it. A life won't stand if you try to hold it alone. You need people who don't step away when weather turns mean. Is that why you want a wife?" "Part of it." He watched a hawk ride the thermals. "I tried marriage once. Elizabeth Worthington, railroad man's daughter. Beautiful. Educated. Everything a man like me was supposed to want." He paused. "She wanted the life the money could buy, not the life that earned it. Hated the ranches and anything that kept me from city rooms. She left for a banker. I was lonelier married than I'd been alone. Not all women are like that." "I know." His gaze met hers and held. "That's why I'm here." The afternoon took them to the creek fence. Thomas worked as he spoke, methodical, hands sure, shoulders easy but set. When a post wouldn't settle, he tried patience instead of force until the earth agreed. "You're patient," Mercy said, passing him a new post. "Rushing gets you hurt." He checked the line again, tamped, and nodded. Most things worth having are worth waiting on. The way he said it warmed her cheeks. She turned to sort lumber she'd already sorted. By evening, they were both dusty and content. Something had shifted across the day. Politeness gave way to ease. She'd stopped thinking of him as Thomas Garrett, wealthy rancher. He was simply Thomas now, a man who worked with his hands and kept his word and carried old hurt without letting it sour him. "Thank you," she said, gathering tools, "for the help, and for—" She glanced toward the house, thinking of the envelope on her table. "You don't need to thank me, Mercy." The way he said her name put a soft flutter under her ribs. "I'll be back in the morning, if you'll have me. Your garden needs attention. Chicken coop wants a few new boards." "You don't have to keep coming," she said, hoping he would. "I want to." He paused at his horse. "Unless you'd rather I didn't?" "No," she said too quick, then caught herself. "I mean, I'd be grateful." His smile was small and sure. "Good. See you at sunup." She watched him ride away and slipped the envelope into her apron pocket, where it stayed unopened but near the whole next day. Whatever else he was, Thomas Garrett was a man who kept his word and gave her respect. In a world that often denied both to women alone, that counted heavy. 3 weeks found a rhythm Mercy hadn't expected. Thomas came with the dawn, worked beside her till evening, and rode back to town under a sky dusted with stars. The chicken coop stood plumb. The garden carried green promise. The pump quit its stubborn tricks. The ranch began to look like itself again, cared for, purposeful, alive. But it was the small things that took root deepest. He asked her opinion before changing anything, as if her thoughts were a tool he relied on. He brought coffee beans from Denver after noticing she was making do with chicory. One evening she found him by Samuel Canton's grave, hat in hand, speaking to the weathered cross as if he expected an answer. "What do you tell him?" she asked, sitting down on the grass. "That I'm trying to do right by you." He worked the brim of his hat with his fingers. "That I hope he'd approve of what I'm offering." He looked at her, open and a little raw. "That I'm grateful he raised you the way he did." Something inside her settled. "He would have liked you," she said. "He always had judged a man by how he keeps his word and treats his animals. You've been gentle with both. Your father's opinion matters to you. Everything I am came through his hands." She touched the simple cross. "He taught me honor is worth more than money. Kindness is strength, not weakness. A person's worth is in what they build, not what they inherit." Thomas absorbed it like a man warming his hands over fire. "My father taught me near the same, and I lost sight for a while. Building can turn to tallying if you're not careful." They rose and walked back toward the house, through evening air sweet, with wild roses along the creek. At the steps, he stopped. Mercy felt a change in him, a decision shaping itself. "Mercy," he said softly, "there's something I need to tell you about why I really came." Fear touched her heart and then steadied. "Go on." "The debt wasn't business." He looked toward the mountains as if asking permission to finish. 5 years ago, when my marriage was failing and I was making poor choices, your father wrote. He'd heard I was buying up distressed properties. He feared losing this place. He turned back to her. He told me taking your home would be taking what you had left of your mother and him. He asked me not to foreclose if he couldn't keep up. Said he'd find a way. You've owned this ranch for 5 years? She sat down hard on the step. The ground of her understanding shifted under her feet. The mortgage, yes. He kept paying what he could. I never pressed. His letter reminded me there are people inside every ledger entry. So when you came, you weren't collecting. She looked at him and everything fit. You were keeping a promise. Yes. He sat beside her, close but not crowded. He wrote again before he died. Said he hoped there was a way to help you keep the land. Asked me to try. The marriage proposal. She heard the answer as she spoke it. Was that his idea? Not directly. He drew a worn paper from his pocket. But his letters painted a picture I wanted to see for myself. I came intending to offer work, manager on a smaller place. When I met you, he didn't finish, but his voice held wonder. This is his last letter. Would you like to hear it? She nodded. Thomas read in a tone that made the words sound like Samuel himself. She's got her mother's heart for healing and her own head for figuring. Never seen her back down from honest work or honest trouble. She'll make a man a fine wife if he's got sense to see past calico to the gold underneath. I won't be there to walk her down any aisle. I'll rest easier if a man with honor is looking out for her. Tears blurred Mercy's view of the yard. She half laughed through them. He was matchmaking. He was hoping. Thomas folded the letter with care. So was I once I met you. The proposal wasn't charity. It was a selfish request of a man who'd found something he didn't know he was missing. What were you missing? Her voice was hardly more than breath. Someone real. Someone who'd choose me instead of what I own. A partner, not an ornament. A woman who knows the difference between a house and a home. He slid the letter away. The envelope I gave you, there's no debt to clear. Your father repaid me in ways counting can't measure. What's there as a gift either way? Security. A choice that's yours. And if I choose you? The question surprised her with how right it felt on her tongue. Hope lit his face, warm and plain. Then we choose each other. Partners in what comes. She thought of the past 3 weeks. How they worked without stepping on each other's hands. The quiet between them that rested instead of pressed. The time she caught herself watching his hands and wondering how they'd feel holding hers on purpose. The loneliness easing. I have conditions, she said. He sat up attentive. Name them. This ranch stays in my family's name. I don't disappear into your accounts. Agreed. I'll have papers drawn that make it yours outright. I want to say, real partnership. In business. In decisions that matter. I'd be offended if you offered less. A smile touched his mouth. I didn't fall for a decoration. The word hung there, fell. It quickened her pulse and steadied it at once. One more thing, she said, voice low. Kiss me. So I know whether this is right, or just two lonely people talking themselves into it. He went very still. Then he raised a hand and cupped her cheek, thumb brushing a tear she hadn't known was there. Are you sure? Mercy leaned into his palm. He bent and kissed her like a question. She answered. The kiss deepened the way evening does, slow, certain, natural. When they parted, foreheads resting together, their breathing had found the same rhythm. Well, he whispered. Yes, she said. The word held choice, trust, and a future. Yes to all of it. They married on a crisp October morning 6 weeks after he first rode up her lane. Mercy kept it simple. Circuit preacher, Mrs. Henderson as witness. The ceremony beneath the old oak where they'd shared so many quiet talks. She wore her mother's dress, ivory silk carefully altered and still beautiful. Thomas had offered Denver finery. She chose roots. You look beautiful, he said when she stepped under the tree. The wonder in his voice let her believe him. The preacher spoke of love and honor. Mercy heard the cadence but watched Thomas's hands around hers, strong, gentle, sure. When they exchanged rings, his voice steadied, then trembled just enough to tell the truth. This mattered. You may kiss your bride, the preacher said. Thomas did, tender as sunlight through leaves. Mrs. Henderson sniffed and smiled both. Mrs. Garrett, he murmured afterward, as if tasting the words. Mrs. Garrett, she answered, feeling the rightness of it in her mouth. They signed papers at the same table where she'd laid his letter, where coffee and courage had changed 2 lives. Mercy looked at his name inked beside hers, and felt fear turn into something she could finally call love. The celebration was coffee and Mrs. Henderson's apple cake and stories of Samuel that made them all laugh and ache in the same breath. After their neighbor rode home, Thomas and Mercy faced the quiet of their first evening as husband and wife. Any second thoughts? he asked as she set plates to wash. Are you having any? Not one. He came behind her, hands light on her shoulders. But if you need time, Thomas, she said, turning in his arms. Do you love me? The question surprised him. He searched her face, thumb tracing her jaw. I do, he said simply. It's fast. We're still learning each other. But I love your strength and kindness. The way you see the world. I love the woman who nursed her father and kept her heart whole. Good, Mercy said, and kissed him. Because I love you. Not the idea of you. You. Their wedding night was gentle and sure. They learned each other with patience, reverence in the touch. When they finally came together, it felt like returning to a place you only realized you were searching for once you've arrived. Afterward, they lay quiet, her finger making small circles on his chest, his hand drifting through her unbound hair. What now? She asked in the dark. Do we stay, or must you go see to your spreads? That depends on you. He stilled his hand in her hair. This is your land. If you want to build here, we will. If you want to see the other ranches, we'll do that too. She pictured the world beyond her valley and found her courage. I'd like to see them, but this will be home. Then we'll split our time, he said, kissing the crown of her head. Build something bigger together than either of us could alone. Tell me about Wyoming, she said, nestling close. He talked of wide grass and snow lines on distant peaks, of spring roundups and the right kind of pasture, of Jake Sullivan's steady head and Martha's booming laugh, and yearly barbecues that drew neighbors for miles. He talked her to sleep with pictures of a life taking shape. What about children? She asked later, bold in the dark. Do you want them? Someday. Little ones running this house again. I'd like that. His voice was tender. I used to think children needed perfect circumstances. Maybe they just need parents who love each other. We can give them that. We can, he promised. Morning brought shy smiles, fresh coffee, and work done side by side with wedding rings catching the light. It felt natural. When do we leave for Wyoming? She asked as they came back from a barn. Few weeks. I want this place secure, and I want time to be married right here where we began. He checked the line of their fence the way he checked most things, twice. We'll carry this place with us wherever we go. Mercy smiled. She knew it was true. Whatever waited in Wyoming or Kansas, they would take with them the memory of a man riding up to collect a debt and staying to give his heart. 2 years later, Mercy stood on the porch of the Wyoming ranch house, the mountain air clear and thin, watching Thomas and Jake work a difficult colt in the far corral. Their voices carried soft on the breeze. Steady instruction, a laugh when the colt showed them both he had opinions. Mercy's hand rested on the swell of her belly, the child inside kicking like a small mule. Wyoming had become home in a different key. She kept accounts, helped Martha plan the branding feast, rode out with Thomas when her condition allowed. She discovered a talent for managing people and supplies that pleased her practical soul. The hands brought their troubles to her as readily as to Thomas, and she solved what could be solved with fairness and a kind word. Mrs. Garrett. Martha came out, dusting flour from her apron. Telegram from town, the one you've been expecting. Mercy took the yellow paper with a tremor she couldn't name. She expected news about her Colorado place and the young couple they'd hired to mind it. Instead, she read a message from her father's old doctor in Denver. What is it, dear? Martha peered at her face. A family in Denver. The Washingtons. Mercy read it again. They've been caring for a 12-year-old boy since his parents died last spring. They can't keep him. The doctor remembered my father's visits with the boy's mother. Said she spoke of me kindly. He asks if we might, she swallowed, take the boy. Take him in? His name is Daniel. His mother was Sarah Washington, a seamstress. The doctor said she and my father were friends during her treatments. Mercy pressed the paper to her chest. He'd want me to help. I want to, but I'm expecting, and we're far from Colorado, and Thomas. Thomas what? came the familiar voice. He walked up from the corral, hat tipped back, sleeves rolled, dust and light making him look like every good day Mercy had ever had. After 2 years, he was more handsome to her, not less. Love has a way of deepening sight. "There's a boy in Denver," she said, handing him the telegram. "An orphan. The doctor thinks my father would have wanted us to help." Thomas read and looked up with thoughtfulness, not resistance. "Daniel Washington," he said. 12. "I know it's a lot," she started. "It isn't." He folded the paper carefully, the way he did with things that mattered. "It's exactly right. A boy needs a family and a purpose. We can give both." Relief made her sway. He was at her side in a breath, arm around her waist. "You all right? The baby?" "I'm fine. Just full up." She leaned into him and felt her heart settle. "You're sure?" "He won't be a stranger long," he said, his smile breaking warm. "And our child will need someone to help keep him in line. An older brother is a good start." 3 weeks later, they stood on the Denver platform as the westbound hissed and clanked into the station. Daniel Washington was a serious boy with his mother's dark hair and eyes too old for 12. He'd been polite but wary during their few days in the city, answering cleanly and offering little. As the train took breath, Mercy saw uncertainty cross his face. "Nervous?" she asked, sitting beside him on a bench while Thomas saw to the baggage. "A little," he admitted. "I've never been on a ranch. What if I'm no good?" "Then you'll learn." She kept her voice steady and warm. "My father used to say the only way to fail at ranch work is to give up. If you try and keep trying, you belong." "Mister." Garrett seems. Daniel searched for a word and found a true one. Kind. But important, too. What if he changes his mind? Mercy's heart ached for what life had already taught him. "Look at me." He did. "Thomas and I don't make promises we can't keep. When we say you're family now, we mean it. Not for a while. Not until it's inconvenient. Family." His careful face softened just a little. "My ma talked about your father sometimes. Said he treated her like a person even when she couldn't pay. That sounds like him." Warmth filled Mercy at the memory. "He would have liked you. He'd be glad we found each other." Thomas returned with tickets and a grin that smoothed worry. "Ready for adventure?" Daniel squared his narrow shoulders, and Mercy saw a glimpse of the man he could become. Steady, thoughtful, brave in the ways that count. "Yes, sir." The journey north was a ribbon of sky and talk. Daniel's questions about cattle and horses came one after another, exact and earnest. Thomas answered every one with patience. Mercy watched the beginning of a bond take root. "Look," Thomas said later, pointing out the window as the land lifted. "Home." Daniel pressed his face to the glass. Buildings spread against the wide. Horses in the near pasture. Mountains sharp beyond. "It's big," he breathed. "Big enough for all of us," Mercy said, "with room to grow." Jake and Martha met them at the little station, welcome written on their faces. Martha insisted on a homecoming feast, though it was near midnight. She wrapped Daniel in a hug, took his measure, and started making lists out loud. "You'll room with Tommy Henderson a spell," she told him as they climbed into the wagon. "He's your age and talks more than a stump preacher at revival, but his heart's good." Daniel nodded solemnly, but interest sparked his eyes. Boys find boys the way water finds low ground. The ranch house glowed warm as they rolled up. Mercy felt the deep rightness of coming back. This was what her father had left her in the end. A foundation sturdy enough to build on. A good man to stand beside. A home broad enough to shelter others. "Welcome home, son," Thomas said as they climbed down. The word son settled Daniel's shoulders. Not wary now. Willing. 6 months later, Mercy gave birth to their daughter in the Wyoming bedroom, while Martha commanded, and Thomas wore a path in the kitchen floor below. They named her Sarah, for Daniel's mother and for the ties that run through time. Daniel turned out gentle and sure with a baby. He hummed songs his ma had sung and rocked her through the sharp crying hour. When work pulled Thomas out for days, Daniel stepped into what needed doing without being asked. "He's going to be a fine man," Thomas said one evening, watching through the window while Daniel taught Tommy to rope a fence post, correcting with patience that sounded like Thomas's own voice given back. "He already is," Mercy said, settling Sarah in her cradle and moving to the window. Outside, the mountains held the last light. The air carried horses and hay and wild roses along the creek. "He's just growing into it." They stood together in a quiet that felt like prayer. Love had built this room. Work had strengthened it. Choice held it steady. "Do you ever wonder what if I hadn't ridden up that day?" Thomas asked, half smiling, pulling her in closer. "Never," he said before she could answer, firm and certain. "Some things are meant. Your father knew it, I think. He set the pieces on the table and trusted us to put them together. And Daniel, another piece we were meant to find." He kissed her temple. "Family built on choice as much as blood. Love multiplies when you give it room." Outside, laughter rose from the yard when Tommy finally caught the post true. Sarah stirred in her cradle with the small sounds babies make when they're about to wake. Far off, cattle lowed as night settled in. The wind slid down from the hills like a hand smoothing a quilt. Mercy smiled, full of the gratitude that reached back to a cracked red seal and forward to children yet unnamed. The debt that brought Thomas to her door had become a foundation stronger than any ledger could record. Samuel's influence ran like water under everything. Quiet, steady, life-giving. "Come with me," Thomas had said without saying it. That first day, she had. She would again. The best journeys start with a simple yes. Two people decide to believe in each other's goodness, and the rest is building. Barn roofs, fence posts, families. Wind through the canyon. A home that holds.